SAFSTOR Matters!
Hi, I'm Marty Cohn, and welcome to episode 7 of SAFSTOR Matters, a program that features activities at the Entergy Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant. To review, in August of 2013, Entergy announced that it was going to close Vermont Yankee at the end of 2014. This occurred on December 29th, 2014, and by mid-January of 2015, all the nuclear fuel was removed from the reactor and put into the spent fuel pool. Vermont Yankee certified to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that the reactor had permanently ceased operations and was permanently defueled. A lot of work has been done to transform the plant and organization to support long-term storage prior to full physical decommissioning. Now, in episode 1, our guest was Joe Lynch, Government Affairs Manager for Vermont Yankee, who gave us an overview of the decommissioning process. In episode 2, we had Greenfield Fire Chief Robert Strahan and Emergency Preparedness Manager Mike McKinney talk about emergency planning. In episode 3, Ken Swarner gave us a talk about the dry fuel storage and spent fuel management program at Vermont Yankee. In episode 4, we had Jen Stromson, who is the director of a new organization called the Institute for Nuclear Host Communities, and she talked about the economic impact of Vermont Yankee, or the closing of Vermont Yankee. In episode 5, we had Paul Paradise, our decommissioning director, give us an update. In episode 6, we had Eric Howe, who is from Maine Yankee, talk about what was then considered the gold standard of decommissioning, but of course that was before Vermont Yankee. Today, our guest is Patty O'Donnell, a member of the Town of Vernon Planning Commission. Welcome to the show, Patty.
Thank you for having me, Marty.
So while I introduced you as a member of the Vernon Planning Commission, that's just your current title. Tell us about your involvement with the town over the years.
Well, I've been involved with the Town of Vernon for over 20 years. I served as a school board member and then a school board chair, a select board member, and then I was a state representative for the Town of Vernon and Guilford for 12 years. After I decided to retire from the legislature, I actually went back to work as a select board member because we knew a lot of transition was coming along, and I felt that my experience and knowledge in Montpelier and in the region would be a help in trying to help the Town of Vernon figure out where do we go from here. And in that role, I decided to work full-time as a Planning Commission member. I think that's where my services are best provided for the Town of Vernon to help us into the future.
Great. You've been a real strong force to the benefit of everyone who lives in Vernon. So you're actually a good person for me to ask this question, which is, how did Vermont Yankee end up in Vernon?
You know, that history, I know I'm old, but that was a little bit before my time as far as being involved in the town. From what I understand, the utilities wanted to build a nuclear power plant somewhere. And Vernon actually wasn't their first choice. There were other communities. They wanted to go to Putney, they wanted to go to Brattleboro, and no one wanted them. So Vernon decided to make the decision to host Vermont Yankee at the time at the Vernon site.
Oh, interesting. So you've lived in the town for 25 years. What kind of neighbor is Vermont Yankee?
Vermont Yankee's always been an awesome neighbor. We have 78 employees that lived in our town. So when there was confusion about issues, we always had someone who worked there that we could go to and talk to and discuss, and they were always honest and frank with us. So we could discuss issues with them. They've been a great neighbor and friend. They've helped the community in many ways, our fire department, our police department, our local schools. I mean, when I was in the legislature, Vermont Yankee used to host a 5th grade class from both Vernon and Guilford to come to Montpelier every year, and they would spend the day learning about, the politics of Montpelier, people's jobs. We talked to lobbyists, we talked to legislators, senators, governors. So it was an awesome experience for the kids. So from something that simple right up to being there anytime we needed them for anything. They are the ones that wired the school for the internet way back when. They've always been there.
That's good. Financially, what has Vermont Yankee meant to Vernon?
Well, at one time, Vermont Yankee was paying about 82% of our taxes.
82%?
In Vernon, yes. That has minimized over the years, and right now they're probably at about 50% of our taxes. So economically, it's huge for the town of Vernon, and it's gonna decrease every year to an end point. I mean, Vermont Yankee or Entergy will always pay taxes on the dry cask storage and the property that they own, but it will be nowhere near what they pay now.
So, as a host community, what has been the pros and the cons of hosting a nuclear?
I think that if I were to say that the real pros, I mean, everybody talks about the money that Vernon got from Entergy, but it wasn't the money. It was the human. The people involved, the people that lived in our community that worked at Vermont Yankee. They volunteered on our fire department. They coached our kids. We had, over the years, we had employees whose wives taught in our schools or husbands taught in our schools. They've just always been an asset to the community. They're community members. They're valuable community members. And I think that's the biggest loss.
But what about, there has to have been some cons.
The cons, I think, is living in a world with a nuclear power plant in your community. I mean, we've all watched over the years what's happened with protests, and all of that takes its toll on the residents and employees also, because we've always known that Entergy, or Vermont Yankee before Entergy, was always a very well-run, safe plant. And it was always pretty frustrating to have people who aren't part of our community come into our community and make all kinds of accusations that really weren't true. I think even the residents of Vernon that didn't work at the plant took that personally, because I think, we were very proud of the kind of facility that was run within our borders. And it angered quite a few people.
Well, that's a good segue to this short break that we're going to take. We found this newscast about the day Entergy announced that it was going to close, and it reports on how Vernon reacted to that decision. We'll be right back.
Vermont Yankee has around 630 employees, many of which live right here in Vernon. Town residents say that I spoke to say most people in the area have some association with the power plant and are afraid that losing Vermont Yankee means losing a big piece of the town's population, possibly causing surrounding businesses to crumble with it. And 2 representatives from Windham County, however, are split on the issue.
They're a big party of the base. I mean, they're my morning people, they're my afternoon people. You have the townspeople, but they're townspeople. They live here too. So if they don't have a job, they're more than likely not going to live here.
And I feel bad for the employees. I feel bad for the economics of the community. But in my opinion, the plant needed to be closed. It was generating nuclear waste that we don't know what to do with.
It's not just the economic impact, it's going to be the volunteers and just the coaches. They've done everything. They've done everything that good citizens in their community do.
Welcome back. In this episode of SAFSTOR Matters, we're talking with our guest Patty O'Donnell, a longtime Vernon resident and member of the town's Planning Commission. So we just saw a news clip from August 27th, 2013, when Entergy announced it was closing VY. 2 years later, how has the town responded to the news?
Well, Vernon's always been a versatile community. We pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. We started looking at our budgets and talking about how we can minimize the effect of closing Vermont Yankee. So the financial aspects of that we started working on right away. Interesting enough, the first woman who was interviewed in that she was running the schoolhouse grocery, which has now closed because of lack of business. So, that was probably the first business to fall in our area. As far as the economic impact studies, we knew before Vermont Yankee closed the economic devastation it was going to have, not only to Vernon, and that's, I think, what frustrates me the most is people talk only about Vernon. Look around our county. It's had an effect everywhere in our county. And we haven't felt the full effect yet because we still have employees there that live within our communities, that are still going to our restaurants and still buying in our stores. That's going to stop. So the economic impact is going to get worse and worse as time goes on. And I think it was just a total lack of insight for the state of Vermont to not recognize this. And Vermont Yankee became a philosophical issue. There was no fact in the end as to what was really happening at Vermont Yankee. It became a political issue, and that's unfortunate for the residents of this state.
So when it closed, one of the things that we did was there was a fund set up. Entergy agreed to pay $10 million over 5 years, or $2 million a year, for economic development of the county. Is that working? Are you talking to other members of the county? I mean, it's not just Vernon, as you said. It's
not just Vernon. I mean, Vernon obviously is losing the most. But the frustrating thing for me is when it was announced that Vermont Yankee was going to close, I was the chair of the Vernon Select Board. I was contacted by one state official, Annie Noonan, from the Department of Labor, as to how the state can help the town of Vernon and the employees of Vermont Yankee. That's the only contact I got from the entire state. The town got together and we applied for a grant. We wanted to start an incubator on, we have all of these engineers, all of these well-educated, brilliant people working at Vermont Yankee, and we thought, let's give them the opportunity to start their own business. Their expertise is energy. So let's start an incubator, give them the opportunity to start a business mostly in the energy field, and to really look at renewable energy or research or, do something to get themselves started. They all had a 1-year bonus, so it gave them time to be able to have a paycheck and get their business started, and we didn't get a grant. So, I don't see really any of the grants that have been given out at this point having really developed any jobs.
Wow. So what were you going to call that incubator?
Re-energize Vernon. And we actually we're working, and the Planning Commission is working on a few different projects right now. We call that Re-energize Vernon.
It's a good umbrella. So recently, the Vermont Tax Department has told Vernon to add VY to the education tax grand list. What does that mean for the town?
I'm afraid that's going to be devastating for the town because Entergy was willing to negotiate with the town of Vernon and to try to do a step-down tax program to help us slowly get used to life without Vermont Yankee there. Vermont Yankee's understanding, and it's their battle to fight. It's not the town of Vernon's battle to fight. But their understanding was the $25 million that they gave to the state of Vermont as a bribe to be able to stay open for 1 more year. The education tax was going to be taken out of that $25 million. We found out just a couple weeks ago, we were contacted by the tax department and told that we had to add them to our grand list. Now, the problem with that is we had already sent out our taxes. We had already had our first tax installment. So, but we don't have a choice as a town but to send Entergy a bill for school taxes. And it's up to Entergy to figure out whether that $25 million was supposed to be part of their school taxes or not. If we don't send them a bill, the taxpayers in the town of Vernon have to make up that $3 million. So we had... Under statute,
right,
if a town decides to exempt a business from its tax rolls, then the taxpayers in the town have to make up the cost of that business taxes. So that meant that the townspeople in Vernon would have had to make up $3 million. And there's no way that the taxpayers in Vernon can afford to do that. Now, Entergy got their tax bill. They will pay their taxes, but that doesn't do a single thing to the school taxes for the residents in the town of Vernon. because that's the statewide tax. So that will all go to Montpelier, along with the $25 million that Entergy's already paid. That will go into the education fund.
And it doesn't benefit the town directly?
Not at all.
Okay, so final question that I had, it was, there's been a lot of talk in the newspaper. You've been advocating a gas plant for the town to replace the loss of VY. Tell us about your plans.
The Planning Commission has been looking into a gas plant. As you know, Kinder Morgan's gas pipeline is going to come 6 miles away. Now, when you look at that area of Vernon, that has always been an area that has generated power for the state of Vermont for over 100 years, because we have the dam, and for 42 years we had the nuclear power plant. It stands to reason it's a gold mine piece of land for generating power. We have the switchyard there, we have the coupling to attach to the switchyard. So we started to look into whether or not it would be feasible. We've done our homework, we've gotten as many answers as we can at this point, and now we're going to the community. We're going to have a public meeting on November 10th for Vernon residents to discuss whether or not they want to have the Planning Commission continue down the road to looking at a gas plant. At this point, we've put a lot of work into what we've done, and we felt it was time to go to the community and make sure that it's where they want to go. It's where they want their future to be. So that's what we're going to do on the 10th.
So this is going to be a community meeting where there'll be representatives from the town and from this group?
It'll be mostly the Planning Commission. We will do a presentation. We'll have a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll explain where we've been, what information we have found out, and where we will go from here. And then it'll be up to the community to decide.
Do you have any sense, you've been out and about, what kind of feeling do you have? How are people responding? The
sense I've had so far is people are very supportive of it. There are a few people, there's always going to be a few people in town that say they don't want it for one reason or another. But for the most part, people have been very supportive of a gas plant.
And in terms of your discussions and talking with the people about the gas plant, are there other ideas that have been circulating? Or? There
are other ideas. One of the ideas that we've looked at is joining together with UMass and UVM, and this is going to be in the future because we'll need the Public Service Board or the PSB building in order to start it, but start a research center on renewable energy. Let's look at the future of energy in Vermont and in the region. One of the things that really isn't being discussed right now is the condition of our grid. Recently, over the past couple of years, we've lost 3,500 megawatts of power on our grid. That's a lot of power, and that's before the announcement of Pilgrim closing, which is another 600 megawatts. So it's a huge amount. It's really making our grid unstable. And we can talk about renewable energy all we want, but it's intermittent power. So on a day like today, the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. So we're not producing a lot of electricity. What do we have on our grid? The more we minimize the power on our grid, the more dangerous the situation becomes. And I don't care who you are. If you're running a business, you need power. If you're living in your home, you need power. I mean, there are people, yes, that live off the grid, but that's not the majority of Vermonters. So it goes a long way in helping the region stabilize its power situation. It will bring low-cost energy into the state of Vermont, which will hopefully help to bring back some businesses to Vermont. If we can keep our taxes down, have a low utility cost, we'll start to be able to be looked at in a favorable way by businesses that want to come to Vermont.
Now, have you had an opportunity to talk to folks up in Montpelier about
We
this?
have not. We've talked to a few people. We've actually tried to get a meeting with the governor, but haven't been successful at it yet. And at this point, until we have our public meeting, we all believe on the Planning Commission that the Vernon residents should decide this issue, not a Planning Commission or a select board, a group of 5 members of any commission or board. It needs to be a community decision. So once we have our community decision, then we will really go to town and get the rest of the work done. But it's looking very favorable for the town of Vernon because of the fact that we have that switchyard there and the coupling, and the pipeline is coming so close.
Now, November 10th, when and when?
It's going to be at 6:30 at the Vernon Elementary School.
And it's open to the public, and you want everyone to come and
It
learn.
is open to the public, but we really are only going to take questions. This is a meeting about Vernon and what Vernon wants to do for the future. So, you know, you can never have a meeting that the public isn't welcome, and nor would we want to. But really, this is for Vernon residents to have their say.
Well, Patty, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for your long-standing support of Vermont Yankee, and thank you for everything that you're doing for the town of Vernon. I mean, I've known you for a few years. Listening to you today, you really care about what's going on in Vernon, and you're doing something about it. And I thank you for that, and as well as the whole town. So while we're trying to schedule one of Entergy's attorneys to come on the show to discuss some legal issues around decommissioning, our next show will hopefully feature our site vice president, Chris Wamser, who's been a fixture at Vermont Yankee for almost 30 years now, and he's got some good insights as to what Vermont Yankee was like before, what it's like now, and what he sees as the future. I want to give some special thanks to Dennis Cordell for writing the original music for the show that you'll probably be humming the rest of the day. Karen Wilson for all her behind-the-scenes magic. And a big thank you to the folks here at BCTV who not only help us with the production of this show, but recognized us with the 2015 Best Series of the Year Award. It's a beautiful award. We proudly accept it, and I take it wherever I go to show off this wonderful award, and we greatly appreciate it. For all of us at Vermont Yankee, I'm Marty Cohn. Thanks for watching.